Hello and welcome to another episode of India and Global Left. If you are new to the show, please smash that subscribe button. Also consider becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon, or donate small amounts given in the link in the description box. But the least you could do is to watch this show, like, share, and comment. Without further ado, let me welcome our guest tonight, Chris Hedges. Chris is an American journalist, author, and a political commentator. Please check out his YouTube channel and Substack, links of which will be given in the description box below. Chris, welcome back to India and Global Left.
Thank you.
I wanted to discuss primarily Charlie Kirk, his assassination, and the aftermath of it with you. Maybe a place we could start is your column called The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. If you could explain to our viewers what do you mean by the creation of this martyrdom and what it means for dissent in particular in American politics going forward?
Well, all extremist or violent groups elevate martyrs. That was true, for instance, in the Russian Revolution. There was a Bolshevik who was killed in the 1905 uprising, which was the dress rehearsal for the 1917 revolution. Of course, the Nazis had the Yost Weasel, and then had the song, which became the party anthem. And we saw that immediately. But even before the alleged shooter was apprehended, Trump declared him a martyr, announced that he would get the Presidential Medal of Freedom, ordered that flags be flown at half-staff. Any criticism of Kirk, who was an unrepentant racist, homophobe, Islamophobe, attacked feminism, any criticism, it was interpreted as celebrating his death, a moment of silence in the Congress, and then someone who wanted to pray, and then it erupted into a shouting match. So immediately he assumed that role, and then we saw this Nuremberg type rally in Arizona, which people should watch. I mean, talks like Stephen Miller, Trump's top policy advisor, was just full-blown fascism. And so the martyr is used in these movements to justify violence against a group that is blamed, rightly or wrongly, in this case, the radical left, for the death of the martyr. And any shirking, any refusal to destroy the enemy, any attempt at dialogue or compromise is a betrayal of the martyr. And it's quite effective. And that's precisely what happened the instant he died. And we have seen now that kind of explosion or that institutionalization of his martyrdom has followed in the days since.
You have also written recently talking about Antifa, which you are not an admirer of. There was a debate or criticism from excuse me, I'm blanking on his name, the anarchist, David Graeber.
David Graeber.
During Occupy Wall Street, you have criticized Antifa. If you could tell our viewers what is Antifa and what is the implication of Trump administration calling for this amorphous group as a terrorist organization on dissent in particular?
So Antifa doesn't have any formal structure. It's an amorphous group because it doesn't believe in hierarchy. And it, especially that black bloc segment of Antifa, which latched on to Occupy encampments, they did not participate in the decision-making or consensus. They kind of used the Occupy activists as human shields, and then they would go out into the street and smash windows and confront the police with their faces covered so they couldn't be identified. Of course, elderly people, people who were disabled, people who were undocumented, they would run. They were mostly young kids, young males, white, and leave the other people behind, often in very precarious situations. they destroy. It's called feral in their terminology. This with nothing planned, you destroy for its own sake, and it's a mob-like quality. They go in a group. They're all dressed in black, replicating really the kind of animalistic behavior of the very police they confront. But my big problem with them was that they had utter disdain for the nonviolent activists in Occupy, but essentially used them. I wrote a column calling them the cancer of Occupy. They doxed me and then would picket the places that I spoke. It didn't matter where the city was, and they all carried the same signs, which was "F you, Chris Hedges." So on the other hand, they're not a terrorist group. There's no legal validity, but they were used. Antifa was used by Barack Obama to justify the coordinated, and it was coordinated, nationally coordinated shutdown of the Occupy encampments across the country because the state feared the Occupy encampment. It crossed political lines. It spoke about our economic and political condition. And of course, Trump is using Antifa in exactly the same way. So any of us who are attacked as belonging to the radical left can be tarred with material support of Antifa. It's what the UK has done with Palestine Action, and swept up under terrorism laws. That's really what's happening.
And how broad is the dissent that Trump is going after? We know that the assassination of Charlie Kirk has not come in a vacuum. There has been already consistent and very organized attempt to clamp down of dissent on university, much of which is related to the uprising on the campus because of the genocide in Gaza. We have seen Trump targeting law firms and people who were critical of him in the judicial process. We've also seen Trump going after media, using lawsuits and all kinds of threats and intimidation tactics on media that he doesn't like, and some of which you and I may not necessarily like either. But all this seems very dangerous. You have mentioned in one of your articles about dissidents, artists, gays, intellectuals, the poor, the vulnerable, people of color. If you could tell us about the spectrum of the dissent that Trump administration is going after, because quite often than not, it is presented as some radical left, and a lot of people might not be aware of what he means, who he is going after.
Well, there is no real radical left in the United States, or what exists of the radical left is quite marginal. What he's really talking about is going after Democratic Party. I mean, the Democratic Party in Europe would be a far-right party. It's the party of war. But he's talking about going after the traditional liberal class, liberal institutions like the mainstream media or universities, George Soros, who he is accused of funding the radical left. I mean, the irony of this is that George Soros's Open Society Foundation, like AID's democracy initiatives, is really designed to thwart or stymie popular movements. That's why Morales threw them out of Bolivia. So, but that's there. He's going after the institutions and those mainstream figures that defy him. They'll be the first. But then those of us who are more marginal will be next. So look, fascist movements, it's true in India, anywhere else, they go after the vulnerable. They are patriarchal, hyper-masculine movements. So that's why they target the GBLTQ community. They target artists, intellectuals, people who provide reflections or critiques of society. It's not the playbook is the same anywhere, and that's what Trump is doing. And the actions that you mentioned, going after law firms, really shutting down free speech on college campuses, intimidating the media, and also buying up the media. So we have Trump supporters, Ellison buying CBS, potentially CNN, appointing arch Zionist Bari Weiss to head the news division, potentially at CBS News. This is all. So he's not. This isn't just a rhetorical feint. He's quite serious about it. And we went through three stages, in essence. They built up the fiction of anti-Semitism to tar or condemn those who were opposing the genocide, in particular students. And of course, universities were complicit in the sense that they acknowledged that there was a problem of anti-Semitism on the campus. Well, that's completely spurious. I went to Harvard. I've taught at Columbia and Princeton, and not that anti-Semitism doesn't exist, it does. But the idea that these institutions were fostering anti-Semitism is ridiculous. Remember that the Trump assault on the universities, they had a lot of collaborators on the trustee boards, these hedge fund billionaires and private equity billionaires who worked as a kind of fifth column within the universities. So the universities capitulated, unfortunately, and next we saw the demonization of undocumented workers and migrants, like they were all criminals and they were parasites, and the countries in Central America had emptied their prisons to flood these people, felons, across the border. I mean, all this kind of stuff. And that was used to give ICE, the Immigration Enforcement Agency, a massive budget, a budget that now is larger than all the other federal law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, and to begin to construct a series of detention centers throughout the United States. And if anyone thinks that these detention centers are solely for migrants, they're very, very naive. The Kirk assassination was the third phase, where Stephen Miller, for instance, claimed that Kirk, without any evidence, that Kirk's murder was part of an organized left that he would root out and destroy. I mean, his talk in Arizona was quite chilling, calling his opponents evil, and these are the three kind of stages that have been set by the Trump administration to essentially shut down what's left of our open society, and they're very, very serious about it. It's not. And we look at Project 2025. I mean, Trump's an idiot. Trump is just the front man, but the people around him know very, very well what they're doing, and what they're doing is extinguishing what is left of America's anemic democratic system.
And what is your sense of what, apart from the ideologues of the writers of the Project 2025, I'm thinking about Stephen Miller, Joe Lonsdale, and all kinds of people who never believed in free speech. But nevertheless, there was this trope within the right that the left has been something against free speech. They are in support of cancel culture, etc., etc. And this was really sold to a lot of people that the left basically has stifled free speech in American society. Now that the right is doing it in a much more substantive manner by using the levers of the state, by using RICO charges, terrorist laws, foreign funding, which are much more concrete than some fringe, quote-unquote, left people, deplatforming, people that who don't like. I would assume them to be people who don't have the craft of debating or engaging with people whose opinion are not necessarily very palatable. What is your sense of the response of this within sections of the right, who I might like to believe them as genuine believers of free speech?
No, they're not genuine believers of free speech. I mean, this is how Charlie Kirk is sold to us, that he cared about free speech. This is absurd. He set up Professor's Watch and City Council Watch to essentially publicize opponents and get them removed from their positions, whether that was on city councils or within the universities. He demonized his critics. But the right, when it rises to power, will always use the system to and call out. And cancel culture was real. It was kind of ridiculous. It didn't, as you point out, didn't have the power of the state behind it to essentially shut down free speech. but it was a kind of noisome movement on college campuses, for instance. So the right will always all of those rights to speak out and liberties are sacrosanct in the rise to power. But then once they have power, they shut everything down. That's the traditional trajectory, and that's precisely what we're seeing. So the idea that they care about free speech is ridiculous. They care about free speech until they have the power to shut it down, then they don't care about it anymore.
A lot of people are comparing it to the post or the McCarthy era, where everything was linked to the Soviet Union and communism. We are seeing Pink Code and others being now tied to the Chinese Communist Party or Iran. Immigrants being linked to Venezuelan gangs with or without evidence. Um, uh, what is your sense of a comparative in comparison to the 50s and the 60s? How bad is the situation now within the United States?
Well, it's worse because in the 50s, in particular, that was McCarthyism, they were blacklists. So you would have the FBI show up at a school without any evidence. They would give a list of professors, even high schools. And those teachers or professors would lose their jobs and they would be blacklisted and they couldn't be hired again. They hounded people out of Hollywood. They went after journalists like I.F. Stone, who at the height of the McCarthy era couldn't even get a job at The Nation magazine. So he starts I.F. Stone Weekly in his basement. But the institutions remain intact. The institutions acquiesced to the demands of McCarthyism, including forcing professors to sign loyalty oaths. Now it's about the capture of the institutions themselves or their destruction. So it's far more ominous than it was under McCarthyism, as bad as McCarthyism was.
You mentioned about Trump going after the Democratic Party, sections of the Democratic Party, or let's say many of the aspects that the party represents. The last time I met you, we had a discussion about the Democratic Party itself, and you have been an open critique of the Democratic Party. You've been linked to the third party movement. I'm just curious. What are your thoughts about the Democratic Party, particularly at a time when the Trump and his comrades have gone full fascistic? How does it look to you, looking back at some of the debates that you had about this lesser of two evils, or the possibility of reform within the Democratic Party?
Well, the reason we have Trump is because the Democratic Party is bankrupt. It doesn't actually function as a political party, i.e., its base has no say in the decision making of the party, the policies of the parties, and even the candidate. I mean, Kamala Harris never had a primary; she was just anointed. It is completely captive to corporate money. I looked at the last presidential election as a contest between corporatists and oligarchs. Corporatists want one form of capitalism, oligarchs want another. Corporatists want stability, especially with trade deals. They will make investments overseas. It will take a while, sometimes 1 or 2 years, for them to begin to return a profit. Oligarchs want chaos because oligarchs practice a pure form of rentier capitalism. They set up toll booths between you and things you need and then extract enormous sums of money for you to achieve it. So that's why they buy up water systems and sewer systems. That's why they want a healthcare system that doesn't function. That's why they want a decline in security, because then you need private security and gated communities. Everything that education. That's why they want to privatize education. So that's rentier capitalism, and the oligarchs won under Trump. That's a better way to think of the clash, the political clash in the United States. But neither political party, none of the ruling elite, responds to the concerns and, of course, the growing economic deprivation that afflicts most of the United States. The Democrats were full partners in the deindustrialization. In fact, led it under Clinton in 1994 with the North American Free Trade Agreement. They Clinton and Biden were the primary movers for militarizing the police, rapidly expanding or massively expanding the carceral state. We have the largest prison population per capita in the world, over 2 million people, 40% of whom did not commit a violent crime. The three strikes are outlaw. The deregulation of the FCC, which has allowed these billionaires to essentially buy up the media landscape, which is happening right now, mostly Trump supporters. So the Democrats created or fertilized the ground for a demagogue like Trump. And that is always the case. That was true in Weimar. That was true in Yugoslavia when I covered the war. That bankrupt liberalism ensures that you get a demagogue who responds to the anger. Pankaj Mishra wrote a very good book on it, The Age of Anger, that I think captured precisely that zeitgeist. No, the Democratic Party is a corpse as a political party. It doesn't work. The midterms, which are unfortunately a year away, that Trump and his allies through gerrymandering, that's redistricting, are moving very hard to make sure that they retain a majority in the House and the Senate. At best, the Democratic Party might be an obstructionist force, but they have no vision. Again, Kamala Harris's campaign illustrates that. It was visionless, celebrity-driven, issueless, and that's what the Democratic Party is. The only thing they have to offer is we're not Trump. If they had run a candidate, let's say Bernie Sanders, who responded to the economic distress, the sense of stagnation and frustration, I think they could have beaten Trump. Trump's a moron. So no, the Democratic Party in the end is a kind of full partner in our emergent Christian fascism.
What does it mean for alternative politics in the United States? You have long campaigned for third parties, but even going beyond party politics, because one of the things I'm hearing from activists on ground is that on one hand, there is a tremendous activists are in tremendous back foot in the United States because of how the laws are being used against them. On the other hand, there have been a groundswell of volunteers in many of these activist circles, whether it is fight for immigrants' rights or whether it is for organizations like Pink Code in disrupting power politics. Given dissent exists within the United States, what does the future of progressive U.S. politics look like, and where would it come from?
So Teresa Armato wrote a good book. She was Ralph Nader's campaign manager, also a brilliant attorney in her own right, called Grand Illusion, and I worked for Nader's campaign, where she just laid out how the two ruling parties conspired to block third parties, in often cases even getting on the ballot. I think at this point, all of our energy has to go into building militant movements that begin to cripple and shut down the state. That's primarily labor. And you're right, Code Pink and other groups have seen a groundswell of support. I think that's where our energy should go. Shama Sawant with Workers Strike Back. Shama herself is running for Congress in Seattle against one of the stalwarts of the Israel lobby and the war machine. So I think that certainly investing time and energy in the Democratic Party is futile, and that we do have to. Our power is collective, we have to begin to organize that collective power and use it. That's the only hope in terms of at least slowing this assault on democratic institutions and the open society.
I wanted to ask you about what Max Blumenthal and others are talking about Charlie Kirk's assassination, that towards the end of his life, Charlie Kirk was moving towards critiquing aspects of aspects of the right in regards to their support of Israel. And as I understand, it was part of the pressures from below within the MAGA that sees the Zionist camp or the support of unconditional support of Israel as not something that represents America first. What do you make? What is your sense of this analysis that has been really going on within sections of the left with regards to the assassination of Charlie Kirk?
Right. So I interviewed Max about this. And he's, of course, been reporting on the right and in particular on Kirk for many years. So the polling illustrates the fact that even among the MAGA base, among the young, there's very little support for Israel. Kirk certainly did not come out in support of Palestinian rights or any kind of full-throated condemnation of the genocide, but he certainly gave space for critics like Tucker Carlson and others of the Zionist project and the genocide. According to Max's reporting, this deeply angered. Now, remember these groups. He had a budget of $80 or $90 million a year, but these groups, and this is also true with Bari Weiss's media empire, they're heavily funded by the Zionist lobby because they serve as mouthpieces for Zionist propaganda. And the threat, according to Max's reporting, was that if Charlie Kirk didn't toe the line, if he didn't spew the talking points that Israel and the Zionists wanted, they'd pull the plug on his funding, which is kind of interesting. And I don't, people have speculated online that maybe he was killed by Israel. I don't think so, because Israel had plenty of ways, starting with the withdrawal of money, to pull the plug on Charlie Kirk, and then character assassination and demonization, which they're very good at. So I think they could have taken him down. I mean, we don't know. We don't know the motives of his assassin because he's apparently not cooperating. So, but yeah, I thought that was very interesting. But that's, you're just seeing cracks everywhere. You're seeing Marjorie Taylor Greene denouncing the genocide out of the MAGA movement. Israel's ability to sustain its lock on the political system is disintegrating under the onslaught of this live stream genocide, which has just repulsed almost everybody.
I guess we would end by asking you about the genocide itself and what is your sense of the stage that we have reached in Gaza and Palestine as a whole? What is your sense of what is going on ground there?
Well, Israel's quite upfront about what it attempts to achieve. Gaza doesn't really exist anymore. It's been bombed and bulldozed into rubble. The Palestinians are being lured with the promise of food, which, of course, these poultry food supplies and the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And then once they get there, they're locked into concentration camps. They're not allowed to go back to the north. Israel is talking about removing the Palestinians from Gaza. Where is the question? They would like to push them into the Sinai. And they're talking about emptying the West Bank. The only two ways to stop the genocide is for outside forces, NATO forces, to break the blockade and create a no-fly zone, which is what they did in northern Iraq after the first Gulf War. I was there with the Kurds, or for the United States to suspend arms shipments because Israel depleted its weapons stocks long ago. I don't see that happening. We see a performative response on the part of the UK and other governments with declaring a Palestinian state. That's kabuki theater. Remember, the UK has only cut arms shipments to Israel by 10%. That's really a kind of way to absolve themselves in the eyes of history. The only meaningful action is to stop the weapons. I don't see either of that happening. And therefore, unfortunately, I think Israel will achieve its goal of ethnically cleansing Gaza, and then they will turn and do it on the West Bank. That will create tremendous upheaval within the Arab world. At the same time, Israel is expanding the territory of quote unquote greater Israel, not just in terms of seizing Gaza, but parts of southern Lebanon and Damascus, all the way up to Damascus, parts of Syria. And then they are carrying out airstrikes, not only against Syrian military facilities, but Iranian, not just military facilities, but civil infrastructure. And I think with this latest meeting in Qatar, you're seeing an understanding, perhaps, on the part of the Arab regimes that Israel intends to essentially become a quasi-imperial power. Israel only has about 6 or 7 million people. I think there are 467 million Arabs and another 90 million Iranians. And you had, for instance, with Sisi in Egypt for the first time calling Israel the enemy. I mean, this is all significant. So I think it's overreach on Israel's part. But in the short term, I don't see Israel, any outside force stopping Israel from its demented campaign, its genocidal campaign in Gaza and ultimately in the West Bank. I mean, Israel already controls 80% of the West Bank, by the way.
What is your sense of the impact of the Arab world coming together collectively in not just condemning but making strong statements about about Israel's bombing of Hamas leadership in Qatar? I'm thinking about these Arab states being allies. I mean, some people are saying that it's not good to think about them as allies, but let's think of them as entities that have some leverage on Washington. So I'm thinking about these two kinds of pressures. One is more and more people in the United States have come to realize the atrocities of this genocide, and part of them is within the mega base, and with Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and others taking that issue up. There seems to be some pressure on the US administration, and on the other hand, there are these quote unquote allies in the Arab world. Could that make a difference together?
No, I think the Trump administration is completely captive to the Israel lobby. Strong statements were long past the time when strong statements are meaningful. Chuck Schumer, will always issue a strongly worded letter for whatever violation to the Constitution Trump engages in, but it's meaningless. There are immediate mechanisms that these Arab states and Turkey and other can take. They can deny Israel access to their airspace. They can cut the land corridor. So the Yemenis, the Houthis, disrupted the maritime traffic in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. And I was in Jordan last summer, set up a huge land corridor, literally hundreds of trucks. I saw them carrying in vegetables and consumer supplies and construction equipment and everything else to skirt the disruption of maritime traffic of trade through because of the assault on the shipping. So they could shut that down. They're thin, but they don't. And that's because they're largely puppets of the United States. But they are dealing with I've been in the Middle East quite a bit since October 7th, Egypt, Jordan, the West Bank, 2 trips to Qatar. And on the street, people are furious and have every reason to be furious at the betrayal of the Palestinians by their government. So you have autocratic regimes like Sisi's in Egypt that prohibit all protests because they recognize, probably correctly, that the moment people get to the street to protest the genocide in Gaza, they're going to protest the Egyptian government that helps facilitate that genocide. So it's very volatile. And I'm waiting for meaningful action. We haven't seen any yet.
And do you believe the theories about Israel collapsing internally because of both economic and political reasons within Israel?
I don't know if it'll collapse, but it'll become a kind of despotic. You have apparently a huge flight of largely secular Israelis, some numbers, a small country, but they're saying up to 500,000 people. Netanyahu, the religious Zionists have clearly taken control. So you have that war between secular Israeli society and the messianic vision of Ben Gvir and these kinds of figures. Whether it will collapse. I mean, Elon Papi is talking about collapse, perhaps within 3 years. I think it's hard to predict that Israel will disintegrate into a kind of despotic, theocratic country is probably inevitable, and with a kind of economic decline. I mean, one of the things that genocide has done is wreak havoc with the Israeli economy. But how long it will last, I wouldn't want to hazard a guess.
And what is your sense of what the rest of the world could possibly do at this point in time? I mean, there are some who say that the rest of the world can't do much, given it's the United States sending arms, giving all kinds of diplomatic and propaganda support to Israel. But there are also others who talk about boycott, divestment, and sanctions. I'm curious, given Trump administration attack on all kinds of international organizations, from the United Nations to WTO to UNFCCC, et cetera, you name it, they're attacking everything. And it is as if the rest of the global South, who have not been hitherto included on an equal basis on these post-Second World War international organizations, have now scrambled to protect some vestiges of these organizations. Under such a situation, what's your thought about what can the rest of the world do, given this genocide is so intolerable for so many people across the global South?
Well, clearly sanctions. I mean, they can sanction Israel, and the United States won't sanction Israel, but if all of the European countries sanctioned Israel, that would have quite an effect. So I think I've been a long supporter of the BDS movement because that was what crippled South Africa and the South African economy, and that's the mechanism we have to use against Israel. We're a long way from that point, but that's the way to kind of bring Israel to its knees.
Final question. You wrote about it's a rather philosophical question, or maybe strategic question, about violence and dissent. In one of your articles, you wrote about how the use of violence in protests, in dissents, and dissident leads to a loss of moral authority that generally popular movements have. At a time when the state has become extremely violent in the United States, and we are seeing this in large parts of the world apart from the United States, from a people's perspective, what would be your advice to those who are involved in pro-democracy movements, protests, labor activism, and so on, about their strategies going forward?
Well, the state wants us to speak in the language of violence because that's a language it speaks far better than us. In the United States, we have 70,000 members of the special forces alone. These are just death squads for those of us who are in places like Iraq. And as long as we have the capacity to communicate, I mean, nonviolent resistance movements like Gandhi's movement would have never worked in Stalin's Russia. Gandhi took advantage of the British press, ironically, and the Indian press. So it depends how far along your totalitarian system is. At this moment, violence is a gift to the state because, one, it's demonized, allows, and this is what we saw with the Charlie Kirk assassination, it allows the state to demonize the movement, but ultimately the state has resources to carry out violence, including wholesale surveillance and courts and militarized police and arbitrary detention that we don't have. I mean, we can't win that kind of battle. However, when I covered the war in El Salvador, I covered the war in Bosnia, when everything is shut down, then you will get violent reaction. That violence is often nihilistic. But at that point, your civil society is finished. It's extinguished. It doesn't exist. So, I mean, I hope we don't get there. But for the moment, violence is deeply counterproductive to those of us who want serious social change. We have the capacity to shut the system down. that, Batista in Cuba wasn't shut down by Fidel and the Barbudos. It was shut down by a national strike. Same with the Shah in Iran. And the ability uh, to essentially halt political activity and commerce, it's within our hands if we organize. And that's really, at this moment, that has to be our goal.
We live it there in the spirit of collective protest and organizations against authoritarianism and barbarism. Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.